welcome back to Pool Genius. This is the Week 3 NFL Survivor Pool video. My name is Steven Andress, joined each and every week by the lead analyst over at PoolGenius, Jason Lisk. If you're watching this video, you survived. You're not alone. There hasn't been much carnage the first couple of weeks, but Jason, as we recap Week 2 before heading into all the Week 3 data over at PoolGenius, two things stand out to me. Number one, despite a lack of carnage, more than 7% of Circa Survivor was eliminated. And in another pool with more than 8,000 entries that I'm in, more than 18% has been eliminated on the season. So those are higher numbers than I anticipated. And the second thing I wanted to touch on here as we recap Week 2 is just the nature of how things can change and evolve from when we record this video on Tuesdays to when games kick off on Sundays. And last week, the Minnesota Vikings were a prime example of that and how the PoolGenius tool evolved to take in new information and new data that was crucial in our decision-making process for Survivor.
Yeah, like the Vikings are a specific example. They opened at 5.5 when we recorded the show on Tuesday. We still didn't know Atlanta's situation.
Yep.
Mooney had missed week 1 and had not played in the preseason, and he was certainly in question, and so was Drake London. And then Minnesota had some injuries that came out as well. So we saw that line move a full 2 to 2.5 points at places, down to 3.5 or 3, depending on where you look. So by the time it got down there, it moved below a lot of other options by Sunday. So very few of our subscribers, and probably those that didn't update, honestly, were some of the few that got them as their final recommendation, because certainly you can generate a recommendation on Tuesday or Wednesday and then come back and regenerate and see what's changed. And so by Sunday, we had seen others. Detroit had moved up a little more. And we saw, I'm trying to think, the Rams were
slam dunk on Detroit, by the way. Hats off to you and the team on Detroit there and making them. So that's what I saw. That was the biggest observation I had, is that early week, the Vikings were a recommendation, and then you guys took in more information, and then they moved way down and Detroit moved way up. And I mean, they killed them. It wasn't even a sweat.
Yeah, that was an interesting, because we did get very late steam back on Detroit. I don't know if you're watching the odds, like
Yeah, up
literally
to 6.5 or so, right?
And then it dropped back like to 6, and the money line went down. But Detroit had been sitting around 6.5, and that's the thing. It's not that we have super confidence that any one team's going to win, right? We're playing the numbers. But when a team like Detroit, that we judged had decent future value but not excessive, in a situation where Dallas was super popular, there was lots of teams to take shots on by being off those teams and on somebody like Detroit, who wasn't quite as risky as getting down to the -3s, 3.5s. And so that's what ultimately drove a call like that.
If you picked Dallas last week, count your lucky stars. I'm a little salty that 20% of my pools didn't get knocked out by the Cowboys losing. That would have been nice because I had 0 Cowboys last week, but I digress. That's going to happen. You just never know how it's going to work out. So Jason, again, just a friendly reminder, everybody, before we get into the biggest favorites of the week, the second tier favorites, to look at some wide angle lens view popularity. If you find this video helpful, if you watched the first couple of weeks and found it helpful, hit that like button for us. Hit the subscribe button. Goes a long way to allowing us to share this video with other people on YouTube and making it easier for them to find this video as well. So thank you to everybody who has watched this video over the first couple of weeks. It's been a huge success, and we have you to thank for that. And also, we can let you know that the 3-day free trial is still available. If you have not claimed the free trial yet, you can find the link down in the description. It's 3 days. So again, use it wisely, because if you sign up on Tuesday, things might change, markets might change. So be sure to check it out. We'll give you a little preview of what the subscription involves each and every week. I can tell you that I used PoolGenius to take down a $10,000 Survivor pool last year. And before I used PoolGenius, I rarely made it to November. So I am a firsthand account of the success of this tool and its possibilities. So give it a shot if you have not yet already. And without further ado, Jason, let's get into week number 3 here. So go ahead and pull up the data grid for us. This is something that you see when you log into PoolGenius as a subscriber. It shows you all of the favorites. the win probability both by betting market and PoolGenius's algorithms and models. You also can see the popularity and also future value all in one place. And there is an overwhelming favorite in week number 3. It is the Buffalo Bills as a 13-point favorite against the Miami Dolphins. But two caveats there. They play on Thursday Night Football, and they have an enormous amount of future value. The other two biggest favorites, and when we say big favorites, we're classifying that as teams that are favored by more than a touchdown. That's the Green Bay Packers, 8.5-point favorites on the road at the Cleveland Browns, and the Seattle Seahawks, 7.5-point favorites at home against the New Orleans Saints. So right off the bat here, Jason, first impressions of that list, popularity predictions. If we're using the early data from national pools here, obviously this changes each and every week based on the rules of your pool. You want evidence of that? Look at Circa Survivor last week, where the Ravens were the second most popular team picked compared to other national pools where the Ravens were the number 1 most popular team. So keep that in mind when you're using this. That's why we always recommend the customization options that are available on PoolGenius. We'll show that a little bit later in the video with Jason's personal account. But to me, Bills and Packers, Jason, are teams that I really want to save at this point.
Yeah, I think there's two different things. I would definitely I'm leaning save Packers, right? Because they aren't number 1 in win odds. So you're actually getting them not at a super great EV if our pick popularity estimates are right. They would have to be, I think, drop below 10 to really entertain sprinkling there for an EV play. And they do have a ton of future value now, not as much as Buffalo, but they do have a bunch of good spots. And I'll show that here in a bit. After I talk about Seattle, I'm going to show you the season odds that we have in another tab. But Buffalo to me is a little different. Like, they have a lot of future value, right? There's a lot of really good weeks to use them. This is one of them. So the question is, where does this rank? I don't think it's number 1. I don't think it's number 1. I actually think next week they play the Saints.
Go ahead, hit
Yeah,
the season planner tab. Hit
yeah,
that season planner tab while you're talking about this with the Bills' future
yeah.
value. You can see all kinds of green here.
So all this green on Buffalo for the next 3 weeks, right? And then you have more green at several other spots where they're going to be really low owned because they're going to be mostly used here in the next 3 weeks. This is a good spot. And next week at New Orleans looks like a really good spot at 89%. They're going to be a huge favorite over the Saints. But that week 5 spot is actually probably because of what's available that week. Because when you look at that week, who else is available? Baltimore. Okay, maybe I don't want to use Baltimore against Houston. Maybe we want to save them for Chicago or Miami or Cleveland or the Jets, late in the year at home in week 12, or the Burrowless Bengals now on Thanksgiving. So there's so many good spots for Baltimore. I'm not sure they're going to be hugely owned next week. And then you're at Arizona, a team who was just popular, could have some risk, and then it drops quite a bit. So that week 5 spot shows a lot more, I would say, quickly narrowing of options, where if you still have the Bills, I think that's probably their best leverage spot. Even if they're, say, 20% owned, they're going to be 20% opposite, 80% on riskier picks and concentrated on some picks. And so I think this is a good spot for Buffalo. I don't mind, as someone who plays a lot of entries, I don't mind playing some Buffalo. I wouldn't want to play the majority of my entries on Buffalo this week. I'd want to hold them back. So I think Buffalo's in play for that reason. But I think there are other plays that are probably optimal if you're just playing one or two.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up week 5 because that's how I look at future value, and it's hard. This is why this is one of the number 1 ways I use PoolGenius, because without this grid, it takes forever for me to go through team schedules and figure out how big of a favorite they're going to be. To have this grid in one place just saves so much time, and it's not like you can just take a screenshot right now and save it for future. These things change. It evolves based on the market and injuries and all kinds of things. So you really do have to check it every week as a subscriber. But that week 5 in particular, the way I look at it, Jason, is okay, are there a lot of other teams that I'm going to be really comfortable picking any given week when Buffalo's a big favorite? And that's the week where I started getting a little nervous when I looked at the other options for that week. So my hope is these next 2 weeks where the Bills look like slam dunk huge favorites against Miami and New Orleans, that a big chunk of my pools use them in one of those weeks or the other. And then I get a lower Buffalo pick percentage in week 5 when I've already used Arizona against Tennessee in that week against Tennessee. Baltimore is the team I want to save in every pool I'm in as long as I can. And Houston is a top half of the league team. So, rather use Baltimore when they're a 2 touchdown, 10-point favorite, something like that. And then after that, you got the Eagles, who I'm a little nervous about their offense at this point. And then from that point on, you're not getting much more than a 3.5 point favorite down the list there. So that's the spot for me as well with Buffalo. And I'm glad you brought that up. Let's go back to the data grid here and look at the other 2 big favorites with Seattle and Green Bay. And the initial popularity here to me is about what I thought it would be. You have Tampa Bay moving up that list a little bit. We'll get to them in a second. They're kind of like 6.5, 7-point favorites right now. I see you guys have them a little bit higher. I'm going to talk about Tampa when we get to the second tier of favorites. But Seattle at home, man, 23% might be tough for me to swallow as well. But just based on future value, that would be the team that I'm using here, and hoping other people use these juggernaut teams and waste them early.
Yeah, that Seattle one is an interesting call, right? That's a tough decision. We've got that at 23%. I'll tell you that I think in certain pools it's going to be much higher. It's going to be they're going to be hugely popular in Circus Survivor, for example.
I agree.
They're going to be extremely popular in a lot of like these big online pools with
Like big money, sharper pools, right?
multiple picks late in the year where you've got to get through with teams like Seattle, and this is one of the few spots to actually use them. So, when we look at Seattle's grid, they're on the third line below Buffalo. Well, you see all white. Now that could shift if they're better than we think. Coming in the next few weeks, they could suddenly become 3 and 4 point favorites in more weeks, but they don't project that way now. So that's what we're seeing with Seattle, and so that's the risk, right? You're probably taking a slight EV hit in the short term to save all these teams in the long term. So I think Seattle's definitely in play. I think you got to know your pool a little bit. Like in a casual pool, I think Seattle's completely in play, right? Like if I can pass them through at 20%, I think that's fine. I
Yeah.
think what you're worried about is 40, right?
Yeah.
Or something. And so I'll probably sprinkle Seattle as well. I think you want to. I mean, to me there's a difference between this and playing Dallas at 20% in Circa last week, right?
For
Or in
sure.
public. Dallas was a lot riskier. Like I know it's only maybe 2 points on the line, but like it's almost 10% on the win odds because of the move through 7. And so while this number's above 7, I think they're playable even at higher popularity to save future value on your entry. You're looking to put them on an entry that had like Philly in week 1, that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, and just for big picture context here, like every Tuesday I re-rank the NFL teams 1 to 32 for that week and that week alone. And Seattle's like close to league average, maybe a little below with the quarterback injuries, but New Orleans has moved up 1 spot for me. They're 31st. They're next to last in the league.
Oh, wow.
So
You moved them up.
I did.
Wow.
I think the Panthers are worse right now.
Okay.
So that's just my opinion.
Despite that comeback, despite what we almost sweated through on Sunday.
Let's just say I filter for garbage time, but also
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not allowed to pick the Cardinals in any of my pools the rest of the season. Let's just put it that way. I'm a little I actually think the Cardinals are going to lose this week to Mac Jones, but that's a story for another day. So, all right. So, is there anybody out of these 3 that would scare you? Like we always talk about the biggest favorites and who would scare you. I mean, I guess Seattle's the obvious answer, but really none of these 3 scare me like Dallas did last week.
Yeah, those you're talking about Green Bay, right? With Seattle and Buffalo, and not Tampa.
Yes.
Well, Green Bay. I mean, it is a road non-conference game against a really good defense. That if they can muck things up, because Green Bay has been pretty good so far. They've not passed at a high volume. They've passed efficiently. They still don't have like an established receiver. We haven't seen they're kind of piecing it together, right? And their defense
Yeah.
looks great. So if this turns into an ugly road game on the lakes of Cleveland, that one kind of like gives me pause coming off of, they're too successful because Green Bay's played both at home, haven't they? Both those wins against Detroit
Correct.
and Walker at home. So this is their first road test, and it's kind of against an unfamiliar opponent. And so that would be like one that,
Fair
if you
points.
told me who gets clipped in a crazy result, it's Green Bay when I think they're a Super Bowl contender. Everybody's talking about it, but we've seen teams like this lose these kind of games. The Browns are going to be one of those teams that they got boat raced last week a little bit. Although they hung around, I think better. I mean, I don't think the score was indicative of they gave Baltimore kind of fits with their defense. Baltimore didn't exactly roll it up and down the field all game long. That Browns defense is going to keep them in some games and give them a chance, I think, as an underdog. And so that one would concern me. I don't know about the Saints. The Saints have gotten 2 games at home, and now they go on the road for the first time. I still think they're number 32. But certainly Seattle's no powerhouse. They're a league average type team. They got the breaks last week. Will they not get them this week? That would be the thing that I think New Orleans is going to have to get like a pick six. They're going to have to get like a special teams play, I think, to win on the road.
Fair points. Fair points. Fair. I can't disagree with any of that. So as we transition here to the second tier of favorites, Jason, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the customization options here for your personal account and kind of walk through just where to find it, and then we'll get to the customized data grid here for one of your pools.
Yeah, I'll pull up. This is under what we call the My Pool Picks page. So I've already set this up. These are pools I'm tracking. You can get up to 30 picks a week. So I've got 27 entries currently set up in here. I have more out there in some smaller money pools that I haven't added this yet. I'll add them as entries get knocked out. But I do have 27 entries alive in 6 different pools here. And so I'll show you how kind of we go through. I already answered like all the questions for the week, like who was eliminated, all that stuff loaded in my picks. But now I'm going to update and I'm going to show you. So what we do is we show you a portfolio based on, these are our grades right now, right? And I have a bunch of large entry pools, right? So I'm going to get fewer bills because of that. I think if I were in a bunch of smaller pools, I might get more bills. If future value wasn't as big a concern in a lot of my pools, but it is. I play in, I'd say most of my pools are above 1,000 entries right now that are on this list. And so, and some strike pools and stuff. So this kind of shows the overall distribution. Then when you go down and look at each pool, it gives you the recommendation for that particular entry in each pool. And then if I want to see the pick grades in a pool, I just click on this little link underneath each pool and I can see what we say and what we grade, because we'll have an individual grade in each pool you have. Like, Buffalo may be graded higher in a certain type of pool than they are in another. And so you're going to see that. So in this particular pool, which is a multi-pick, to win this pool, you got to go, I think you either have to outlast thousands of entries or go 24-0 and split it. And so Seattle grades higher. Like, yeah, they may be popular, but this is the kind of pick you're going to have to probably hit to get to 24-0. And you want to take an advantage of a 7.5 favorite when you can get them in this type of pool. So that's why they're grading top. You see Kansas City a little more contrarian this week in terms of popularity. We anticipate they won't be quite as popular. They're on the road. Lots of factors people want to stay away from. They're 0-2. They do have some future value. So they're not a slam dunk pick, but in this type of pool, a little contrarian type play at low ownership. And then Tampa Bay shows up, and Atlanta, another team that has some future value, but not a ton. Really, Seattle's the only option to say future value this week, unless you go all the way down to the Colts. And so really that's the debate, I think, in these kinds of pools. But the Colts are a little riskier. And so that's kind of what you're seeing on the screen. And so that's how we use our tools. You can go into each pool. You can check each pick grade. I'll go to this is a smaller one here that has like 50 entries left. And you see Buffalo is my top graded pick in that pool with 50 entries left, under 50. So I'll probably use one of those 2 on Buffalo this week and then go with a different pick on the other entry. because I make up 2 of the 46 in that pool that are still left. So anyway, that's how we use our tool. Kind of go in and out, and just great way to keep it organized. Great way to kind of see the data and see kind of like how teams fit in the overall strategy framework, depending on your type of pool.
I love it. My man's cooking over here, people. Pull it up for me, Jason. Let's pull up one of those pools that you have that have like maybe thousands of entries left in it. So we're not seeing
Okay.
Buffalo as number one. And then from there, we'll talk about the second tier of favorites and maybe just give
Okay.
our opinions of those teams. Do me a favor and sort by spread. So we can take a look at where everybody's at right now as we
Okay.
record on Tuesday evening East Coast time. So we talked about those three biggest favorites in Buffalo, Seattle, and Green Bay. That next tier down, Bucks are favored by about a touchdown. You have the Ravens. They opened the week as 6-point favorites. Lions got better, about 5.5. Chiefs are about 5.5 or 6, depending on where you shop. And you have the Falcons as well at about 4.5-point favorites at the Panthers. Let's start with the Bucks, Jason.
Mhm.
I certainly understand the matchup, the team that they're playing, the potential future value. They make me very nervous this week, and I will tell you why.
Yeah.
Number
Sure.
one, injuries.
Mhm.
Their offensive line is pretty banged up right now. Now, if Tristan Wirfs, we get news later in the week and their left tackle is coming back for this, that would go a long way. But he's out right now. They shuffled the O-line against Houston and then had the right tackle go down in Gedeke. So they're banged up. They lost Kalijah Cansey for the year with the torn pec. That doesn't concern me as much. He actually wasn't very good last year, so I'm not all that concerned about that loss. But are again still down Godwin. We'll see if he comes back or not. And it's on short rest this week against the Jets, which concerns me as well. So I think and for anybody that watched that game against Houston, man, that was a physical football game. Like the Texans defense, I feel like I'm curious to track this the rest of the way. It's just narrative for me right now. I don't have anything to go by it, but I feel like in a similar way where teams the week after they played the Lions in recent years did not play well just because of how physical the games against the Lions have been and how tiring they are. I wonder about that too with, teams coming off a game against the Texans defense and how physical they are and how tiring that is. So those are just my red flags that I personally have with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm curious if this holds later in the week. And obviously, subscribers will have to check back closer to kickoff to see. But those are my concerns with Tampa this week.
Yeah, I think there's some valid concerns there. I also think this spread has the potential to move
Yeah.
any number of ways based on what we hear throughout the week, right? I think that it's baking in a large amount of risk that Fields is not playing, and Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback for the Jets this week, which I don't think is a big drop off. In some ways, Taylor's probably a slightly more refined passer.
I think it's
They both
between
have
1
some.
and 2 points, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's not gonna be huge. Maybe it gets to maybe it gets all the way to 7.5 like these others. I don't think it's gonna move significantly above that. Because I don't think they're gonna want to push it all the way to like a 9 or anything. We see some movements there
No,
because of the Cougars.
again, just personal opinion. I think Jets would get bet at 7.5 with Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
think so too. So I don't think it's gonna move that much that way. I think it could go down based on some of the injuries you're talking about. I'm just gonna give you some stats. Like, I mean, the Bucks. This is crazy, right? And we know this is because of these injuries, and Mayfield's running for his life and making plays against Houston.
I
The
mean, they should
Bucks
be
through
0-2.
the Bucks through 2 games are 31st in the NFL in net yards per pass attempt.
Yeah, yeah.
31st,
Doesn't shock me. Yep.
but 3rd in pass touchdowns. So they have, by like passing production, cutting out touchdowns, like one of the worst passing efficiency offenses so far because they just don't have time and they haven't made plays consistently. But then they get in the red zone and they score.
Yep.
And so there is plenty of regression risk here with Tampa. There is some uncertainty with the Jets, who just took a beat down from Buffalo, who I don't think is as bad as they look there. But so this one could come down, and if we see this line move at all under 7, I think the Bucks become a significantly worse play. I think they're kind of below, for me, either Kansas City or Seattle, depending on whether you want to say future value or go contrarian. They're kind of like the squishy middle there right now, and I
Yep.
don't know that they would be outside the top 2 for me for some reason. And they have great spots. I know we talked about that future value number may not be as high as Green Bay, but there's some weeks. I'm going to pull it up here real quick. Week 8 at New Orleans, but I don't think home field matters as much in that series. They catch the Patriots at home. They catch the Saints back at home in week 14, and that's a spot where the other 2 big favorites or the other 3 big favorites are Baltimore, Buffalo, and Green Bay, right? And then you drop down a bit. So if you catch people that are out of those teams and you hold the Bucs till then, when they're hopefully healthier and that offense is humming, I mean, anyway, there's some really good spots for Tampa if you don't think you have to use them this week.
So my big opinion here in this tier is that I'm far more likely to use the Falcons than I am the Chiefs. And I'm not even talking about circle pools where the Chiefs are on holiday slates and you consider just overall pools. You got to pick one a week, 18 picks for the season. I just don't want to pick the Chiefs right now until this offense is back to being fully formed. When Rashee Rice is back, when Xavier Worthy is back. I already had macro concerns with the Chiefs and how much variance went their way last year in these low scoring, losing yards per play over and over again. And they just, were on the right side of all these coin flips, blocked field goals, missed field goals. So I have zero interest in using the Chiefs until we get them fully formed later in the season. But with the Atlanta Falcons, that is the team that highly interests me in potentially if Seattle's going to be really popular in some of these pools I'm in. And when I say that, I mean more than 20%. The Falcons are the team that are interesting to me because of how low I am on the Carolina Panthers. And in particular, this week for the Panthers, number one, they are well known to basically be a 0 in terms of home field advantage. They lost 2 more offensive linemen in the middle of the game last week, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to play this week. They lost their center and their right guard. And if you strip out garbage time, and when I say that, I mean plays where your team at that point in the game have less than a 10% probability of winning the game. So strip out garbage time. Bryce Young through 2 weeks is 34th out of 34 quarterbacks in EPA plus CPOE score. Every QB in the league has at least a 38% success rate through 2 weeks, except for Cam Ward and Bryce Young. And Bryce Young has a negative 20% completion percentage over expected. The next closest is negative 10.8. He is a disaster right now. And I actually like what I've seen from the Falcons through 2 weeks. And in particular, their defense, which is young, which they've invested at least 8 day 1 and day 2 picks on each of the past 2 years. I think the Panthers are a dead team right now.
That may be true. We'll see. They definitely are not humming on all cylinders. We had concerns of Bryce Young. Yeah, I wrote, we have a newsletter, By the Numbers newsletter that we putting out and still are. But in the summer, I wrote a piece on Young and how, what is the truth here? It's really a decision point, right? I think I'm about to make that decision. I pretty much have in the past. Then he played okay after he came off the benching. He was a disaster at the start of last year. He was a disaster as a rookie. He was not because people had such low expectations, what he did in the second half of the year was kind of celebrated. But you look at the actual numbers and it wasn't great. It was marginal. Could this guy start in the NFL? And so I wrote about how this is the make or break year coming off that, because based on just his overall stats from year 2, you'd say quarterbacks like that do not make it in the NFL. I don't care your supporting cast. Good quarterbacks do not do what Bryce Young has done through 2 years. But was that last 8 games a sign of hope that maybe that would continue? And it hasn't. Again, we're back to square one. And I don't know how long you have hopes for him. I'm surprised this line isn't higher. Kind of what you had. I did our adjusted power ratings. I will say we were higher on Atlanta through the preseason. They were in my preseason betting pick overs to win the division, make the playoffs, and over their win total. I was very disappointed in that loss to Tampa, which would have definitely swung things there.
Yeah, they should have won that game. It was bad luck.
They should have. And so I think Atlanta's very live. Now, here's what I would say. Unlike Seattle, Atlanta does have great spots. Their Future Valley actually isn't that different from Kansas City. I get what you're saying on the Chiefs. I am a Chiefs fan. I am 8 miles from Arrowhead right now. It's a tough watch. I think they're better than the Giants. I think they've played 2 tough teams. The close game luck did not go their way. We saw the Kelsey hand it to the Eagles on the goal line, a play that swung the game. We saw the Eagles just fire off and they, do their offsides moves on their tush push and be able to score and never get called for it. And that was a big moment. And so it was a close game. The Chiefs, despite not looking good on offense,
they should have
very easily could have won that game because the Eagles, as you said, have not looked good on offense. I'm actually downgrading the Eagles, even though the market hasn't really yet in my kind of personal evaluation, because I think there's also a risk, by the way, we're going off Survivor here for just a second, but I think there's a risk that the league starts coming down on this tush push play with how notorious and people are now taking slow-mo videos showing that they're jumping off.
Well, they're certainly going to be looking for false starts more now. That's for sure.
It's going to be a point of emphasis. And all you got to do is call 1 or 2 of those a game, and then they're in 4th and 6, right? And it swings the game. Like, this is not to say the Eagles aren't talented, but are they a half point worse if we actually enforce the tush push penalties on when they cross the neutral zone before the snap? Yes. Initially. I mean, Hurts hasn't completed a pass downfield to receiver this year, which is concerning. You have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. What's going on? But I digress. There are causes for concern with the Chiefs. Their defense is way better than Dallas.
100%. Opposite ends of the spectrum.
So Russ isn't going to go for 450 passing yards.
And they're going to be as locked in as they possibly can be. So,
and the counterpoint is you're getting Chiefs at low ownership, I think. You are in Atlanta too, but I will say Atlanta has New Orleans. They have Carolina back at home, and they have somebody else here. Who is the other team? They play. I'll find it. Miami.
Miami, yeah.
So I mean, they have some spots where this isn't you're gonna be using Atlanta this year in survivor pools. You will use Atlanta at various points this year in survivor pools. This may be the spot. I'd like to see the market agree here and move these win odds up, and then I'd be more in. Just because. Oh, road division game, by the way, something we don't believe in, but people do. Bills did just, by the way, blow out the Jets, and that was a road division game. We point out a lot of stuff's myths. I think there is risk, but it's accounted for in the line. That's why this line's 6 and not 9, because it's in Atlanta. It's 6 because it's in Carolina.
VSiN pulled your data on this, by the way. There's a good tweet. Yeah. VSiN posted the full screen graphic of the myth with division versus non-division upsets. Just go find that. It's great. There's really not a huge difference in win probability historically, right, between these teams and games that are 5 to more than a touchdown favorites.
Yeah, no, there's no, in fact, I shared on social, road favorites of 5 to 6 had won 10% higher win rate over the last 15 years than home favorites of 5 to 6. And, that was leading into the Rams and Cowboys results, who were both favored by a similar amount. But I heard so many people talk about the Rams being risky because they're on the road, and I'm like, well, that's accounted for in that spread. The Rams are better than the Titans, relatively speaking, than the Cowboys are than the Giants.
Word. I mean, for sure.
So that's why the 2 spreads balance out, because of where the game was played. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but yeah, I'm not scared of this game. I would like to see the market agree more and push this to a touchdown. That's where I thought, honestly, if they have these offensive line injuries, if that's confirmed, it may get there. And then Atlanta becomes an even better play, in my opinion, with that confirmation.
All right, let's wrap things up this week, Jason, with our top 3 picks for the week. We are basing this top 3 on a large pool volume without any special scheduling quirks like it is in Circa. So I will let you kick it off, and then I'll close us out.
Yeah, I'll start with who I'm not putting in. I'm not putting in Green Bay. I'm saving them. I think there's going to be better spots. I'm saving Baltimore. I mean, I know they're at 1%, but if I'm going to use Baltimore or Buffalo, I'm going to get a big EV payoff, and I'm not getting that here. I'm going to say caveats: Seattle or Kansas City, depending on the type of pool, how sharp it is. Buffalo probably is my third as a 15% of my portfolio type play. And we also want to talk about this. Buffalo in certain types of pools. If you can go find a week 3 pool that starts in week 3 and you can load up on some entries before Thursday night and pick Buffalo on them, where half the pool isn't even going to be filling until Sunday, that's a great way to grab instant leverage in a pool like this and then be ready to benefit from. Because if you can get Buffalo at 8-9% owned because the pool hasn't filled, that's a great way to play it when you didn't have to use teams in weeks 1 and 2 and you're starting fresh in week 3. So anyway, that's a pro tip or a tip that I'm going to try to employ. Look for that.
I'm gonna
But
call
I
it
think
cheat
Buffalo
code.
is the sprinkle.
That's a good pool cheat code.
And then I do like your Atlanta pick as also a diversity play countering Seattle. So I would put Buffalo and Atlanta kind of in that kind of, I want some exposure to them.
All right. My top 3. And again, each and every week, I am instantly drawing a line through the team that's going to be the most popular and not using them in my top 3 as we record here on Tuesday. It looks like that will be Buffalo. So no Buffalo. And if you're watching after Thursday, you didn't lose anybody in my top 3. So there you go, since they play on TNF. So for me, we'll go Seahawks. Again, I agree with you, Jason, popularity dependent. If they're going to be more than 20%, I might have to bump them down for my top spot. We'll see how this evolves later in the week. And, obviously check in on the PoolGenius tools closer to kickoff to see as the data becomes more and more rich. Number 2 for me, I think, is going to be the Atlanta Falcons here. Number 3 is a tough call. I want to save the Packers. I am scared of the Bucs and their injuries and short rest. I don't think we didn't talk about the Colts. I don't think the Colts are great value. I think you're buying them at the top of their price. I think they're more likely to be overvalued right now than getting a fair price on them as a 3.5-point favorite, even though I really don't like Tennessee right now. And everything I said about the Chiefs with me wanting to save them for multiple reasons, it's hard for me to put them in my top 3 this week as well. So I guess that really only leaves me with either Buffalo or maybe the Washington Commanders, but we don't even know if Jaden Daniels is playing or not. So I'll just insert that caveat as well. Jaden Daniels is questionable to play in this game. The line is 3.5. If he doesn't play, this is going lower. There'll be basically closer to a pick 'em. If he plays, they'll be closer to 6-point favorites, maybe 5.5, because he's probably not going to be playing at 100%. I'm concerned that he's not going to be able to scramble if he's playing with a bit of a knee injury, but the spot is just historically, the spot is tremendous. They come off extra rest from a Thursday night game, playing a team that had to play on Monday and now have a short week with Las Vegas. So it's a tremendous spot. I'll say the same thing I said last week. This would only be if Jaden Daniels is playing and only for maybe one entry in a pool where I have a lot of entries. So if I only have one entry left, I'm never using the Commanders, but there's too many teams I want to save or I'm afraid of for multiple reasons. So 1 and 2, Seahawks and Falcons, a gap as big as the Red Sea, and then maybe, Kansas City, Washington. Maybe we just use Buffalo, but it's a clear top 2 for me and don't really have a clear third here, Jason, for me. So that's where I'm at. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we did not touch on Washington, so I'm glad you did. That's one that is definitely a wild card in how this week plays out, because I think they are very live to pick, where depending on where this line ends up. Obviously, if Daniel's out, you don't want him. I don't think the odds will go too low, and you don't want to touch that, and it'll reflect that. So I'll just close with this. We talked about these top teams and who. We don't normally advocate, and I don't think in most pools you need to go lower, but if you had to go between the Colts or you had to dabble in the field goal game, like the two backup quarterback game of Minnesota-Cincinnati, I mean, do you think Minnesota might be better off with Wentz? It's hard to, like, in the short term.
I'll say
Who do you
no.
like?
I'll say no because I actually think Jake Browning is decent. I think Carson Wentz was a dumpster fire the last time we saw him, and it's not just the quarterback discussion. Minnesota has a lot of other injuries this week, at least as we record right now. Offensive line, defensive players. Minnesota is in maybe the worst spot they'll be all season in terms of injuries going into a game. So that's what really scares me.
So that's an avoid. You'd be on the Colts if you had to dabble in somebody
Yes,
else.
I would. I might even take the Colts over Washington if Jaden's
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Colts are in play. There's certainly, you got to recognize. Some people will steam them up because, oh, they're 2-0 all this. There's a high amount of risk. They're a road. They played 2 games at home. They're on the road. They're only favored by 3.5. I think that's the right line. I don't think the Colts are, again, probably more like an average team that has happened to catch the Dolphins at home and then won a game that was controversial at home against a team probably slightly better than them, but that they can play with. And so this one goes on the road. I don't think they're the Rams, who obviously the Rams caught 5.5, and that's why. So I think the Colts are risky. I would consider the Colts in things like strike pools, buyback pools, things like that. I'd be mixing them in for those.
I love it. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments who you are picking in week 3 Survivor pools. There's also that link in the description for the free trial, 3-day free trial if you have not claimed it yet already. There's also a link to the Discord to ask the staff at PoolGenius if you have any other questions as this week evolves. And as we like to say to close out each and every week, there hasn't been carnage yet. We'll see if this is the week of the carnage, but we wish you the best of luck in your NFL Survivor pools.